Nomination pulled. The White House withdraws New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's nomination to be the next ambassador to the United Nations. Why the Republicans' tight majority in the House of Representatives is quite likely to blame. Group chat in court, not those who were on the chat, but the whole issue. A federal judge held a hearing about the war plans that were accidentally shared with a journalist, and that judge is ordering officials to preserve all the signal messages in question for review. This is the same judge, incidentally, that President Trump has said should be impeached for the way he has overseen a controversial deportation flights case. Also, tariff turmoil. The Dow drops one day after the president announces a 25% levy on cars not made in the U.S. And some auto stocks today took a dive. What all this could mean politically and for your wallet. Later this hour, more job cuts. The Trump administration is shrinking, quite noticeably, the size of the Department of Health and Human Services. By how much? Nearly a quarter of its current employees. The impact this could have on the nation's ability to fight diseases. All that tonight. But we're going to start with Ed O'Keefe and Nikole Killion. Ed is at the White House, Nikole, of course, on Capitol Hill. Ed, tell us more about pulling the nomination of Elise Stefanik.
Well, Major, go Yankees. It turns out that the White House realized yet again that the margins are just too narrow in the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, that they can't afford to lose that key vote from the Adirondacks that Elise Stefanik provides. She was set to be nominated and probably easily confirmed, potentially even with bipartisan support, to lead the or to serve as ambassador to the United Nations. But given the margins right now, which sit at about, 218 to 213. By next Tuesday, if Republicans win the two special elections in Florida, it'll go up to 220 to 213, but then there's two open Democratic seats. So you'll have a margin eventually later this year of 220 to 215, with a lot of big votes to come and a handful of Republicans who are likely to vote no. The Speaker, the White House, realizing we can't afford to let it go. Was there some reluctance on her part? Perhaps. Was there also potentially some difference of opinion or personality between her and those that now control the State Department, given that she was nominated and came up as the ambassador pick before Secretary of State Rubio was in place? Yes, I'm told that's also potentially part of it. But the big reason, and the one everyone will focus on publicly, is that margin in the House and how razor-thin it remains.
And, Nikole, this is right in your lane on Capitol Hill. Pick up on what Ed said, not only about the closeness of the margin, the necessity Republicans now see in the leadership ranks on the House side to maintain every viable Republican vote possible, and what this might mean for what's going on behind the scenes in somewhat difficult negotiations between House Republicans and Senate Republicans on how to proceed on a budget and tax bill.
Well, I would first say go Dodgers, but that aside, I think what is interesting is that for all the talk about how narrow the margins are, I mean, we're in the business of journalism. This isn't breaking news here in the Congress. So this did catch some lawmakers by surprise, even within leadership. For instance, we were told Senate Majority Leader John Thune said that he was not given a heads up about the withdrawal of this nomination. We caught up with Majority Leader Steve Scalise soon after the news broke. He didn't seem to be aware at the time before this was all confirmed that her nomination would be pulled. He still was backing her as a solid candidate for the UN ambassadorship. So from that standpoint, many lawmakers were a bit surprised by this. We did hear from Senate Foreign Relations Chair Jim Risch, who said that he did have a conversation with the White House, which informed him that Stefanik's nomination had been pulled. However, he did not say whether or not he believed that that was the right decision. Obviously, Stefanik's nomination went through his committee. She got out of that committee with bipartisan support. He told me that was a decision, obviously, that was ultimately up to the president. I also talked to a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Congressman Brian Schatz, a Democrat. He, too, said Democrats on the panel did not get any heads up about this. And he, as many lawmakers have indicated, believe this is because, again, of these margins in the House, that House Republicans, there's a little trepidation and uncertainty about having the votes in place, particularly particularly when it comes to advancing the president's agenda. So he echoed what we are hearing from some congressional Republicans, that that may be at play as well. I also asked him who he would like to see in the role, and he said Mitt Romney, which would be an interesting choice if it were to come to pass. But, that being said, many lawmakers on both sides of the aisle really felt that Stefanik was solid, was sharp, would likely advance. So it did take many of them aback to hear this news today.
Oh, Ed O'Keefe, let's just put a pin in that. The probability of Mitt Romney getting that nomination, near zero.
Just about as good as the Red Sox winning the World Series. Yes,
Okay.
Zero.
We're gonna keep the baseball theme, which I got rolling right along. Nikole, I want to ask you this, because the president said on social media, Elise Stefanik will go back to her position in the House Republican leadership. Is there a vacancy?
Well, not really, because now that vacancy is filled by Lisa McClain, who is the GOP conference chair, and it's unlikely that she would step down from that post. So whether or not some new leadership position is created remains to be seen. That is something that Speaker Mike Johnson indicated in a post on X, saying that, Elise Stefanik is a great leader, and they will welcome her back to the leadership table, but he didn't define what position that might be. So, again, there's still a lot to work out here in the House. But, again, one thing we know is that, obviously, having those votes in place was important not only to the president, but to the speaker as well.
Ed, quickly, the Signal Yemen attack plan story, day 4. Mistake is the word that Republicans most frequently use. Is it going to be a damaging one for anyone that you can tell involved?
The president is closely monitoring to see what the ongoing media and political fallout from it will be. We can report at this hour that he is standing by his national security advisor and the defense secretary. There was a long meeting in the Oval Office yesterday about all this, where they discussed the possibility of Mike Waltz resigning. Waltz did not offer it. The president didn't ask for it, and he is standing by them. We should also point out that a federal judge this afternoon ordered most of those on this text chain to preserve the texts, to keep them so that they can be added to the official presidential records. A nonpartisan watchdog group here in Washington had sued to ensure that they eventually do end up in the records as a formality, in essence, because they believe that this is classified and it should be part of it. The judge, same one, by the way, ruling in the Alien Enemies Act case, just randomly selected by the district court here in Washington to see it. You've got till Monday to do this. We probably can avoid a court case. Let's agree to get them preserved and move on. We'll see if that happens.
Also worth pointing out, the top Republican, top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee today sent a letter asking for an Inspector General, Pentagon Inspector General investigation and all that, which is a bipartisan move that the White House cannot ignore. Ed O'Keefe and Nikole Killion, thank you so much. Kelly O'Grady joins me now. So, Kelly, tariffs, autos, market reaction. Sum it up for us if you can.
So look, investors didn't love it. You saw all the 3 major indexes close down, but not the crazy thing that we've seen in the past couple of weeks. Where we really saw how investors felt were in the major 3 auto stocks. So I'll just kind of run you through. GM closed down over 7%, Ford down 4%, Stellantis down 1.3%. And really, I'll zero in on GM because that is all about the fact that they have more exposure with where their cars are made than the other big 2. They rely on Mexico and Canada far more than Ford and Stellantis. So when you're thinking about a tariff being slapped on any foreign cars coming into the U.S., they are going to feel it most. You contrast that with what happened in the markets with Tesla and Rivian. 100% of their cars are made in the U.S. Investors loved that because the stock was up today.
Kelly, I want to play for you something that the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, said, because you mentioned Canada and the implications for the auto industry here and there. Let's listen.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over.
Mark Carney also said that until President Trump up front respects Canadian sovereignty, this relationship will remain on the rocks.
Well, I mean, that we have heard some bark and bite throughout this entire thing. We have seen the Ontario PM come to the table and talk with, I believe it was Commerce Secretary Lutnick about different things. But I think what is really interesting here is so much of the supply chains are intertwined. Canada, Mexico, the U.S., and these auto manufacturers invested in that because of that important trade deal, USMCA. And now they're sort of looking at things going, oh my gosh, I have to now bring my plants to the U.S., and that's going to cost time, billions of dollars. And then let's look ahead, Major, to 2026 when the USMCA is up for review. And maybe all of this concern goes away. Maybe this is an entire negotiation. But certainly strong words from the Canadian PM. We'll see if that bark turns into bite.
USMCA negotiated during Trump 1.0. Kelly O'Grady, thank you very, very much.